She was on her knees at the market, scrubbing her stall when the car pulled up. She recognized the shoes before she recognized the face. Italian leather. The kind of shoes a man only wears when he has decided the world should know he has arrived. She looked up slowly, and there he was, the man she had gone hungry for, the man she had sold her mother's wrapper to send abroad, standing in front of her with a woman young enough to make the years between them feel like a wound. He looked at her the way people look at old furniture they once sat on, with the mild discomfort of someone who would prefer not to be reminded. "You are still here," he said. Not a question, a verdict. She stood up slowly, her knees aching, her hands still wet from the bucket. She looked at him for a long moment, at the shoes, at the woman, at the face she had prayed over for 5 years. Then she said, quietly and without trembling, "Yes, I am still here. The question is whether you ever truly left or whether you just changed your clothes." He had no answer for that. He never did. Before we go any further, dear friends, if you are new to this channel, welcome home. You have found a place where African stories are told the way they deserve to be told, with truth, with feeling, and with the full weight they carry. Please take just one moment right now to like this video, leave a comment below telling me where you are watching from tonight, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. I read every single comment, everyone. Now, let us go back to the beginning, where all stories must begin. Before the betrayal, before the return, before the reckoning. Let us begin with the woman herself. Her name was Ngozi. In her mother's tongue, it meant blessing, and she had always tried to live up to it, not with fanfare, not with expectation of reward, but with the quiet consistency of someone who believes that doing right is its own justification. She had been born in Owerri, the third of 6 children, to a mother who sold stockfish and a father who repaired bicycle tires at a roadside stand. They were not poor in the way that breaks people. They were poor in the way that sharpens them, the kind of poverty that teaches you the exact weight of every naira and the exact cost of every decision. Ngozi had grown up knowing that waste was not just foolishness, it was a kind of sin. And she had carried that understanding into everything she did. By the time she was 24, she had a stall in the Ikeoku market in Owerri, selling fresh tomatoes, peppers, and garden eggs. It was not a large store, it was not a profitable stall by any grand measure, but it was hers, and she ran it with the same seriousness that other people reserved for boardrooms. She knew her suppliers by name, she knew which customers paid on time and which ones needed gentle reminding. She knew the market the way a farmer knows their land, every season, every shift, every quiet signal that something was about to change. It was at this stall that she met Chidi. Chidi came to the market the way some men come to places they do not belong, with confidence borrowed from appearance. He was tall, well-built, with the easy smile of a man who had discovered early in life that his smile could open doors that would otherwise require effort. He was not from Owerri originally. He had come from Onitsha looking for work and had found instead a series of arrangements that kept him comfortable without requiring too much of him. He bought tomatoes from her store 3 days in a row before he said anything beyond the price. On the 4th day, he lingered. "You are always here before everyone else," he observed. She did not look up from weighing her produce. The market rewards those who are ready for it. He smiled. "And those who are not?" She looked up then, and something in her expression made him stand straighter. "The market does not punish laziness," she said simply. "It just ignores it." He laughed. It was a genuine laugh, surprise out of him. He came back the next day, and the day after, and the day after that. Courtship for Ngozi was not a performance. She did not dress differently, or speak differently, or pretend to want less than she wanted. She told Chidi early and clearly that she had built her small business from nothing, and that she intended to build it further. She told him that he expected the same honesty from him about who he was and what he intended. He told her he was a man who had not found his direction, but who was serious about finding it. She believed him because there was something in the way he said it that sounded less like a line and more like a confession. They married quietly. A small ceremony with family on both sides, food shared on 2 long tables, a pastor who gave a speech that made her mother cry. Ngozi wore a white dress she had saved over 14 months, buying the fabric yard by yard. In the early months of their marriage, Chidi tried. She would acknowledge that later in the honesty that comes after everything is over. He had tried. He took casual labor where he could find it, construction work, loading and unloading, whatever paid. But the income was unreliable, and the work exhausted him in a way that seemed to drain not just his body, but his willingness to keep trying. Slowly, almost without either of them noticing, the balance shifted. He began staying home more. She began carrying more. The market store, which had been a modest operation, became the household's entire foundation. Their son arrived in the second year of their marriage. They named him Emeka. He was a serious child from birth, watching everything with the wide, attentive eyes of someone taking notes. Ngozi loved him with the particular ferocity of a woman who had decided that whatever else fails in her life, this one thing will not. She worked harder, she woke up earlier, she expanded the store slowly, adding onions, then crayfish, then dried fish. She built customer relationships the way a mason builds a wall, one careful placement at a time. Chidi watched this happen, and it did something to him that she didn't fully understand until later. It humiliated him in a way that made him angry not at himself, but at the evidence of her effort, which was also the evidence of his absence. He became quieter, then critical. Small things became complaints. The food was late. The house was not clean enough. She spent too much time at the market and not enough time at home. She absorbed these complaints the way she absorbed rain, without letting them stop her, but aware that something was accumulating. The change came through a man named Mr. Obiechina. He was a businessman from Lagos who passed through Owerri quarterly to visit suppliers. He had been buying from Ngozi's expanded store for 2 years and had watched her operation with the quiet assessment of someone who recognizes competence without needing to announce it. One afternoon, he stopped to talk about not produce, but about her. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "7 years at this market," she told him, "but I have been working since I was 15. He nodded slowly. "And your husband? What does he do?" The question landed in the familiar place of discomfort. She answered it honestly, the way she always answered hard questions. "He is looking for the right opportunity." Mr. Obiechina said nothing for a moment. Then, "There is a position at a distribution company I have an interest in, based in Lagos. It requires someone willing to learn and willing to work. If your husband is genuinely looking, I can arrange an introduction." Ngozi went home that evening with the kind of energy that hope produces when it arrives unexpectedly. She sat beside Chidi and told him everything, holding his hands the way she used to hold them in the early days, with both of hers firmly, as if she could pass her faith through her palms. "This is it," she said. "This is the door we have been waiting for." Chidi looked at her. Something moved across his face that she interpreted as gratitude and later understood had been something more complicated. "Lagos," she said slowly. "Lagos," she confirmed. "But Emeka and I will be here. You will send for us when you are settled. It is not forever. It is a beginning." He nodded. "I will not waste this." She believed him. She believed him because she needed to, and because underneath everything that had gone wrong between them, there remained a part of her that still wanted the version of him that she had married to be the true one. The morning he left was a grey Tuesday, the kind of morning that does not announce itself, that simply arrives and continues. Ngozi stood at the roadside with Emeka on her hip and watched the bus carry her husband towards Lagos. She waved until the bus became a shape and the shape became nothing. Then she shifted Emeka to her other hip, picked up the small bag she had carried to see him off, and walked back to the market. Because the market was still open, because the customers were still coming, because life does not hold its breath for anyone's departure. The first months were good. Messages came regularly. He had arrived. The work was demanding but manageable. He missed them. He was saving. He would send money at the end of the month. The money arrived. Not a large amount, but it arrived. And to Ngozi, it felt like proof that everything was still in motion. Emeka started primary school. Ngozi attended every meeting, every event, every occasion that the school organized. She sat in the front row. Other parents came to know her as the woman who was always there, always paying attention, always knowing her son's teacher's name. She was both parents and neither apologized for it. At the market, her reputation continued to grow. She had expanded again, this time taking on a second store space and hiring a young woman to help manage the morning rush. The traders around her watched this with the particular mixture of admiration and wariness that other people's success tends to produce. Ngozi is becoming something, they would say, and it was both a compliment and a warning, though she paid attention only to the first part. The silence began in the 15th month. It started the way these silences always start. A message that was slightly shorter than usual, a call that was unanswered once, then twice, then became a pattern. The monthly money that had been modest but reliable becoming unreliable. A week late, then 2 weeks, then not at all. She told herself the usual things. Lagos is expensive. The work has changed. He is adjusting. He will call when he can. She told herself these things the way you tell yourself things when the alternative explanation is one you are not yet ready to carry. But she was a woman who had built her entire life on the practice of seeing things clearly. And the thing she was seeing clearly in the space between his silences was that her husband was becoming someone she did not recognize from the version she had loved. Emeka stopped asking when Daddy was calling. The boy was 7 years old and he had already learned to read the weather of his mother's face. When she was hopeful, he asked questions. When she was quiet, he sat close and said nothing. He was, she thought, too old too fast, and that cost her more than anything else. She went to see Mr. Obiechina when the silence had lasted 4 months. He received her with the careful respect of a man who suspects he may carry some responsibility for a situation he did not intend to create. "I will make inquiries," he told her. "Please," she said. The inquiries revealed what she had begun to suspect. Chidi was still in Lagos. He was still working, or had been until recently. And there was a woman, young, from somewhere in Delta State, who had become, in the language of the report, a fixture. Ngozi drove home from that meeting in a borrowed car, watching Owerri move past the window, the familiar streets, the familiar market rooftops, the familiar sky, all of it exactly the same and entirely different. She put Emeka to bed that night, sat in the kitchen for 2 hours in the dark, then washed her face, made tea, and opened her account book. She reviewed her numbers with the methodical attention she brought to everything that mattered. The store was doing well. The second space was beginning to show profit. The envelope at the bottom of her trunk had grown to something substantial without her fully noticing. She was, she realized, going to be fine. Not immediately, not without pain, but structurally, fundamentally, in the way that counts, she was going to be fine, because she had never stopped building, even when she thought she was waiting. He came back on a Thursday afternoon, 3 years and 4 months after he left. The car was a good one. That was the first thing people noticed. The compound that had watched Ngozi carry her son and her basket through years of silence now watched a clean car park at the entrance and a well-dressed man step out. Ngozi was at her store when a neighbor's child ran to tell her. She finished weighing the tomatoes she was weighing, handed them to the customer, collected the money, and then removed her market apron and folded it neatly on the stall table. She walked home at her own pace. He was standing in the compound when she arrived. There was a woman behind him, younger, wearing the expression of someone who has been promised a specific outcome and is beginning to have doubts about the guarantee. Ngozi looked at Chidi. He looked at her. "You came back," she said. Something flickered in his face. "Ngozi." "No," she said calmly. She was not shouting. She was not trembling. She was simply a woman who had decided what she was going to say and was going to say it. "You left this compound with my prayers and my blessing, and the opportunity that a man gave you because of my name. You used all three, and then you sent silence in return." The compound had gathered without being invited, the way compounds always gather when something true is being said. "I carried this house, I carried your son, I carried the market store that paid for everything in this compound while you were building a life you thought I would never see. I saw it." Chidi opened his mouth. She shook her head, not with anger, but with a finality that carried more authority than anger. "You did not come back to this family," she said. "You came back to this address. Those are different things." The woman behind him had already begun the private calculation of someone reconsidering their position. Emeka appeared at the doorway of the house. He was 9 years old now, tall for his age, with his mother's serious eyes. He looked at the man in the compound for a long moment, then he stepped back inside. That small movement, his son's retreat, was the moment Chidi's composure finally cracked. Something collapsed in his face. Not dramatically, not with tears and apology, but with the slow subsidence of a man who has arrived at the full understanding of what he has done and cannot revise it. The woman left the following morning. Not dramatically, she simply packed her things and arranged for someone to collect her and was gone by 8 o'clock. Whatever Chidi had promised her, the reality of the compound and the weight of Ngozi's presence had revised her expectations completely. Chidi did not leave immediately. He stayed in the compound for 3 days in a kind of suspended state, as if waiting for a judgment that had already been delivered. On the 4th day, Ngozi's brother came from Onitsha. The conversation between the men lasted 2 hours behind a closed door. When it ended, Chidi left. He did not speak to Ngozi before he went. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said in the compound that Thursday afternoon. Ngozi went back to Mr. Obiochina one final time, not to report, not to complain, but to thank him. She said, "You gave my husband an opportunity. What he did with it is his account to settle, not yours." The old man looked at her for a long moment. He said, "You are a remarkable woman." She shook her head. "I am a practical woman. There is a difference." He smiled. Then he said, "Your son, how old is he now?" 9, she told him. "When he is ready, bring him to me, not as charity, as investment." He looked at her steadily. "I have watched you build something from nothing for 7 years. I know what that kind of mind produces in the next generation." Ngozi's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. She simply nodded and said, "Thank you, sir." She walked home through the evening market, past the stalls still trading, past the women still calling out their prices, past the familiar smell of pepper and onions and dried fish that had been the backdrop of her entire adult life. She stopped at her own store. Her assistant had closed it properly, the produce covered, the cash box locked. Everything as it should be. She stood there for a moment, one hand resting lightly on the table she had built her life on, and breathed. Her son was waiting at home. Her store would open tomorrow. Her numbers were good. The envelope at the bottom of her trunk was growing. And somewhere in that quiet evening moment, standing alone at the store that had outlasted a marriage, outlasted betrayal, outlasted 5 years of silence and 1 Thursday of reckoning, Ngozi understood something that cannot be bought or borrowed or promised by anyone with good shoes and a rehearsed smile. She understood that she had never actually needed saving. She had only ever needed time. The elders say that a river does not forget where it comes from, no matter how far it travels, no matter how many other waters it passes through. And they say that the hands that carried another person to higher ground deserve to be remembered, not just when the climb is hard, but especially when the summit is reached. Chidi reached his summit and forgot the hands, and the river that had carried him found its own way to the sea. Ngozi's story is not a story about a woman who was abandoned. It is a story about a woman who discovered, through the specific education that only hardship provides, that everything she needed to survive and everything she needed to build had been inside her the whole time. The man who left did not take it with him. He could not. It was not his to carry. There are people in every market, every compound, every city in this continent who are carrying their households on their backs right now, who are waking before dawn and sleeping after midnight and filling the silence of absent people with the sound of their own unceasing effort. This story is for them. You are not waiting to be rescued. You are already the rescue. And one day, perhaps sooner than you know, the person who left will come back wearing good shoes, and they will find you standing at the thing you built, and the verdict will already have been delivered. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in the simple, inescapable evidence of everything you became while they were gone. My dear friends, if you have stayed all the way to the end of this story, I want you to know that means absolutely everything to me. We tell stories like Ngozi's here because they are true in all the ways that count. Not true as in they happen to one specific woman, but true as in they are happening right now in markets and compounds and small rooms across Lagos and Accra and Nairobi and every city where a woman is carrying more than her share and building anyway. If this story found someone today who needed it, please share it with them. Tell them Ngozi stood at that compound on a Thursday afternoon and spoke her truth quietly and without trembling. And then she went back to her stall the next morning, because that is what women like Ngozi do. They go back to the work every single time. Drop a comment below. Tell me which moment of this story stayed with you the most, and tell me where in this beautiful world you are watching from tonight. I read everyone. If you are new here, welcome home. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a story. And before you go, click on the video on your screen right now. There is another powerful African story waiting for you, and you do not want to miss it. Until next time, my dear friends, stay knowing your worth, stay knowing your value. Nobody gets to define either of those things for you. Good night.